Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening to the panelists. Today's webinar is brought to you by Advice Sense Wealth. So, Advice Sense Wealth is an informed investment, decisions platform, and PMS EIF World is one of the first platforms that Advice Sense Wealth created to make informed decisions in PMS and AIFs. So, having done that, I think we are at a correct opportune time to make informed decisions, and that is why today's webinar with Nippon Asset Management. So we, as a wealth manager, manage close to 400 crores in asset across 100 families, and we've been doing such webinars for a while now, and this is a part of the series of webinars we have had with a lot of capable fund managers. And in continuation, we have the Nippon India team today. So we have Shahzad Madon, Varun Goel, the fund manager, and Animesh Singh from the Nippon Asset Management team. So I will hand it over to them, to introduce and talk about their fund and their AMC per se, and then we will take up Q&A in the later half of the session. Thank you. Over to you, sirs.
Great. Sankalp, thank you so much for having us here. I must thank PMS and AIF World for this wonderful platform with which we can interact with our investors. These are times where obviously investors would like to hear their managers talk about the markets and the outlook and so on and so forth. So we think this is a great forum and this is a great initiative being done by PMS AIF World. Thank you so much for that. With that, permit me to make a little introduction about ourselves. So we represent Nippon Life India Asset Management Company. We were the erstwhile Reliance Capital Asset or Reliance Nippon Life Asset Management Company. We are currently 75% owned by Nippon Life of Japan. Nippon Life of Japan, as you are aware, is one of the largest insurance companies in the world. And like in all things Japanese, invests and does business primarily from a long-term perspective. So it's good, solid business. The way they do it all over the world. Nippon Life owns stakes in over 75 asset managers all over the world. So this is a business they understand very well. This is the largest stake they own in any company overseas. And also, I must tell you, it is a matter of great pride for India. It is the largest single FDI investment in the Indian financial services space. So with that little background, I just wanted to tell you that we have a very solid, very solid parentage, a very solid pedigree. And among the various asset classes, which we manage our AIFs and we manage our PMSs, and we'll talk to you more about them over the next some time. So now coming straight to the matter, I'm sure we have heard of all sorts of words that these are unprecedented times. We have never seen times like this ever in the past. This is and it's true, no one has ever seen this before. I mean, we've never seen a city, a country, or even the world locked down in this manner, right? There's one very interesting observation I had, and since we mentioned we are a Japanese company, I thought we must start with something which is Japanese out there. The Japanese use they don't use alphabets like we do. So they don't have ABC. They have what is called a kanji script, which is actually like drawings. And what you can see from that is that the kanji, or the actual like the drawing for crisis as well as for opportunity is the same. And this actually tells us what it is. So whenever you see a crisis, what we say, there is always an opportunity in crisis. Actually, in the Japanese call it language, the crisis and the opportunity is the same term. So this is something which really typifies the environment in which we are currently operating. So this is first number one. We should always and never forget that whenever we see pain, whenever we see crisis, there is an opportunity. Number two is I'll just talk a bit about the recency bias. And we are all so influenced and so driven by what's happened in the recent past. So we all know, all of us very, very clearly understand, and all of us, I'm sure everybody on this webinar knows what happens in 2008. Then when in 2008, jab kisi ne himmat karke, when they actually listen to, there are two things. There's a heart talking and your head talking. So your head talks and you say that, this is a great time to invest. Market is asked and so on and so forth. Stocks have come in. When you look at that, right, but your heart tells you no, dar lag raha hai, and so on and so forth. We all know this for a fact that every time, whether it is 2008, 2009, whether it has been just after the tech crisis, right? In early 2000s, whether it has been even prior to that, every single time there has been a big, so to speak, crisis, there has also been a great opportunity. And you know what happened 18 to, I would say, actually 15 to 24 months from there, where the returns have been extremely sizable, right? Extremely sizable. But there is always that element of fear that this time it's different. So it's much like we were in school. When we were in school, we always worried so much about, yes, I'll बहुत मुश्किल है. This is so difficult. This is more difficult than it ever has been. So every crisis is like that. When you're in it, it appears to be the most difficult thing which you've ever had. Okay. The other observation I will make here is that, see, markets are always forward-looking. So while we are in the midst of a crisis and there is a lot of it yet to go through on the economic part, which we will talk about, there are a fair amount of questions that we don't know which way it will play out. All sorts. I'm sure you have questions, and we will also try to address it. How do we see this scenario playing out over the next some time? How do we see the economy growing? How do we see earnings come back? Which is the key question on everybody's mind, right? So with this question, I must just tell you, and something which we all know, but it never hurts to remind, that markets are always forward looking. Ab market is pe ye focus kar raha hai ki what happens in the future. It's not so much focused of what is jo ho gaya past mein. They're not so focused on that. So it's very much how will this play out in the future. And to just quote this, that your market in this rally bottomed out at around 7,500 Nifty before we went into lockdown. So what that really tells you, in fact, of course, we moved up and then since floating around there. But this effectively tells you markets are forward looking and markets are waiting to see the next steps which goes on, right? So with these three things, just to mention that there's always crisis and opportunity, we are always too focused on the recent events, and we are forward looking and we should be looking forward. Just a few more comments before we finally get into really the talking more about our products, which is really what we are for. Today, when you look at, and we spoke about markets being forward looking, where are markets? We are actually, what will determine us going forward is sort of the interplay between medicine, if you will, and how soon we find a vaccine or a suitable answer to whatever is from a medical perspective. And two is on the stimulus, both the monetary and fiscal stimulus, which you have seen very, very significant amounts of in the world. So you've seen that different countries, US possibly being the flag bearer or the champion in this, has done a little under 40% if you aggregate the monetary and fiscal stimulus, 40% to GDP, which is possibly why NASDAQ has actually seen like almost a V-shaped recovery. You actually look at it. So we often talk about the recovery and how it will be, and whether it will be U, whether it will be a thin U and a fat U, or whether it will be W, whether it will be L, whether all those alphabets which we talk about, a lot of it is a function of really how this plays out. The truth is no one knows the answer. We will not pretend that we know the answer to all of this as to when all of this is going to be playing out, but we do have our own base cases which we are working with, and which of course we need to keep revising and re-looking at on a regular basis. So a lot has been done on both on the medicine front, of course, which we will not talk about. And similarly, a lot has happened on the fiscal and monetary stimulus. You've also seen that in India, very significant amount. And of course, we're waiting for something to happen on the fiscal side. So just a last couple of comments is that what we just want to mention to you is that we see, assuming these conditions to be, play out, and that you have a situation that closer to the end of May, things start opening up, you would see a significant negative growth, maybe 10% in this quarter, or first quarter of of financial year 2021, maybe, and assuming you see about close to about 85 to 90% of the economy opening up by September, I think you could possibly see a minor negative GDP growth or a flat GDP growth. And thereafter, in the second half, we would hope to, barring any mishaps, we would hope to see a positive GDP growth. So with that, that's the sort of framework we see, that's the sort of earnings we see. And very, very important, before Varun takes over to talk about the various opportunities which are there, because we spoke, there is adversity and there is opportunity. So in every mishap, in every so to speak problem, there is opportunity. We see a few sectors who are likely to gain very, very strongly from this play out. You can even actually see them in stock price performance. Those companies, in actually their earnings and stock price performance, they're actually going to reflect that. So we'll talk about a few themes. We'll talk about all our portfolios. We'll talk about our investment approach, and we'll talk about the few themes which we believe are very, very powerful. So over to Varun.
Oh, thank you, Shagaf sir there. Varun, I will just share the screen and then you can start. I hope that's okay.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thanks, Shehzad. So we'll start by talking about the current market and the economic scenario. And I think all of us have been reading a lot about how things have been difficult. All of us have been reading about how we have seen a very, very significant correction in the Indian equity markets in the last 3 months. I think just to get some perspective going, I think Indian equity market started correcting in early 2018, and that's when we saw the first wave of correction with mid caps started correcting, and then what we saw was a period of 2 years in which a very narrow part of the market actually did well. Around 10 to 15 very large liquid nifty names which were kind of going up and holding the market up till February, and that's when we saw the big correction really take place. And what we have seen is that from the top, we of course corrected by around 40%, we have seen a very significant price damage happen all across sectors, across large caps, mid caps, small caps. No segment of the market has been left untouched, and there has been a very brutal carnage, if I can say, which has really played out in the last 3-4 months. I think it is also important to see, that how has the markets behaved to the various coronavirus related issues. So, and of course, we all know a lot about coronavirus now, so we are not going to go into details of that. But just to give some perspective, even before India went into lockdown, which was on 24th of March, markets actually, if you see, bottomed out on 23rd of March with Nifty hitting 7,500. So in fact, what we see is that markets were actually discounting the bad news much in advance as compared to what the events actually happened. If I remember correctly, on 23rd of March, the number of active cases in India were less than 300, and the number of actually casualties was less than 50. So, but the markets had of course taken a call that this would become much more problematic, and which it has indeed become, as we go forward. So our sense, of course, is that this year is going to be extremely difficult from the corporate earnings point of view. We are looking at minus 10 to 12% GDP growth in quarter 1. We're looking at minus, let's say 2 to 3% growth in quarter 2, and then quarter 3 and quarter 4 we are expecting more like a 0%, 0 to 5% kind of a GDP growth. So overall, one is looking at around, let's say, a 0% GDP growth for the full year. And what that means is that we are looking at a big corporate earnings cut for this year. Having said that, what we also need to keep in mind that equity markets work as a function of corporate earnings, and corporate earnings, while they will go down by, let's say, 20, 25, 30 odd % in this financial year, we would see a very strong comeback next year, as and when economy actually starts chugging along. So our sense is, that by the end of June, if the data points of coronavirus are as per what they have been so far, we should see 70-75% of the economy becoming functional by end of June, and then hopefully by end of September, 90-95% of the economy can become functional. So while there is a big corporate earnings cut, let's say around 20-25%, and maybe some more, this year, we should keep in mind that corporate valuation or stock market valuation is a function of discounted cash flows in perpetuity. So while the companies might see significant reduction in cash flows for this financial year, if we were to do the valuation of any company, we have to discount the cash flows for the next 20, 25, 30 odd years. And in that, this year's profits are very, very small proportion. And to that extent, there is no logic or there is no reason for stock prices falling by 40, 50, 60%, unless the market believes that their continuous operations or their existence itself is under threat. So in our view, a very large segment of the market should bounce back once the economy opens up. What we are seeing in different parts of the world, like China, I'm very happy to share that they opened the Disneyland in Shanghai just a week back. And if you were to think 3 months back, who would have thought that something like a Disneyland could be opened, in just 3 months' time in China, which is really the place where it all started. So we are very hopeful that as and when we see reduction in number of cases, as and when there is a vaccine or a medical treatment discovered, it may be 3 months away, it may be 6 months away, but as and when these things are figured out, as and when we are able to reach these solutions, markets and the economy should see a fairly significant bounce. And once again, the markets will not wait for the exact time of these developments. Markets will again anticipate these things in advance, and we should see a fairly strong bounce even before these things actually happen. In terms of markets and what sectors we believe should do well, as of all of us are sitting at home, we are looking at a lot of internet and data. We are using a lot of applications. So we see there are 4 or 5 sectors which should continue to do very well, even in this very, very tough environment. So we like the whole healthcare bucket. We believe that should continue to do very well. And that we have split up in really 4 parts. One is, of course, the domestic formulation piece, which we believe should do quite well. Second is the diagnostic space, which we believe people will get more and more aware, and they will start taking to diagnostic tests in much larger numbers. The third is the hospital space, where there is a very rapid shift in unorganized to organized, and where large corporate hospitals are now coming up. And finally, we will see the whole health insurance as an opportunity, and also the whole healthcare space should see very, very good growth going forward. Then, of course, there is a telecom space where we are seeing consolidation. We are seeing pricing power return to the incumbents. Again, a sector which we think will continue to do well as people consume more bandwidth, people consume more data. The third space which we think should do quite well is the consumer space. Companies in the foods category, companies in the staples category, personal wash category should continue to do well. And of course, we will see that the digital companies which are participating in the digital opportunity in India, digital advertisements, digital platforms should also do well. And finally, we believe there is a very, very big theme which will play out in the next 10 years is the specialty chemical theme. India, as you know, is already a $35 billion exporter of specialty chemicals. And we believe that in 6 to 7 years, this can become a $100 billion opportunity. So while India has lost out to a lot of competitors in semiconductor space, we have lost out to countries like Taiwan and China, and we have lost out to companies like Bangladesh and textiles. But specialty chemicals is clearly a space which we see which has continued to do well, and we believe they will continue to see very rapid growth in the next 4 to 5 years. So across our various products and categories, and I think a slide will just come up where we will just take you through our various products, where we are seeing a very large allocation to each of these 4 or 5 sectors. So just to recap, so we believe sectors in the healthcare space. If we can move to the next slide, please. The sectors in the healthcare space, sectors in the FMCG consumer side, sectors in the digital space, and of course, sectors on the telecommunication side should continue to do well. So we at Nippon have done around 5 AIFs of different themes. We have an AIF which we did in terms of shift from unorganized to organized, which has done quite well with the 10% plus alpha in the last 3 years since its inception. Then we have something that we call the India Millennial Strategy, which has again done a more than 10% alpha, even in a very, very tough environment in the last financial year. And then we have a strategy which we call the Next Billion Strategy, where we are looking at companies which cater to the semi-urban or the rural population. So these are some of the strategies which we have. As you can see, the performance across the last 3 years have been pretty strong. If we were to just scroll down, we will just see some of these top holdings that we have in this portfolio. As you can see, there is a fairly large exposure to all the 5 sectors that we believe are rock solid, and companies which have high return on equity, companies which have good earnings growth, companies which have unlevered balance sheets. I think the most striking feature that you will see out of these companies that we have put up on the screen is that most of them, you leave out the banking and financial services company, most of them have either negligible debt or no debt. In fact, our aggregate debt to equity for all the companies, 70 companies that we have under investment across various strategies under the Nippon India Alternate Strategies platform, the average debt to equity is only 0.26, which means that most of the companies are actually having either zero debt or no debt. In fact, that 0.26 ratio is also largely because of telecom companies, since that is a sector which requires a lot of capital. But other than that, most of the companies have zero or no debt. And I think this point is becoming very, very important because, as you know, in the last 1.5 months, or maybe you can say till end of May, companies have very little revenue, but they do have fixed costs. They have costs like employee costs, they have debt servicing to do, they have electricity charges, they have rent. All of these costs are fixed costs, and which they have to pay whether they are having any revenues or not. In this environment, it is very, very important that the companies are able to, able to have a very clean and lean balance sheet so that they can survive this tough period and move forward. We will also quickly talk about the new AIF that we have launched on our platform. If we can go to the next slide. What we have is what we call the product, which is the $5 trillion opportunity portfolio, which is something that we launched in the month of January. This is again something which is extremely attractive. We have divided the portfolio into 4 large buckets. And what we have done is we have come in a very innovative bucket in this portfolio where we have invested in the stocks, which we call the self-reliance in technology and research. So we have 4 buckets, which one is ease of living. 25% of the portfolio goes there, which is again rock steady. We have companies in the consumption space, in the pharma space there, unlevered balance sheets, good earnings growth. The second bucket is which we call the self-reliance in technology, where we have 25% allocation to companies in specialty chemical space and digital space. This is going to be the fastest growing sector as far as Indian economy is concerned. And we have put a disproportionately large allocation here because we believe this, this can do really well considering the very rapid shift of business that we expect from China to happen to India in the specialty chemical space. And digital, of course, as more and more people use mobile phones and more people use technology, we believe that this bucket will also do very well. And the third bucket that we have is the banking and the digital infrastructure. We spoke about how telecom is a very, very attractive opportunity. And we believe that, select financial services company in the general insurance space, life insurance space, asset management space, these companies are relatively lesser impacted in this crisis because they take money, from the people rather than lend money out. And as such, they do not have a problem of recovery. And we believe that these sectors should continue to do very well. If we can just scroll down a little bit, so we can just take everybody through the returns. As you can see, this portfolio was launched in January. I'm very happy to share that not only has the portfolio outperformed by more than 10% in this time, but as you can see, it has bounced back very well when the market has bounced back, and on the way down, it has actually fallen a lot less. So both on the upside and on the downside, we have seen the portfolio do rather well. So our sense is that after 2.5 years of correction that we have seen in the market, and this time the correction was a little different in the sense that we first saw mid caps correcting, and we saw a very small part of the market doing very well. And finally, we saw a capitulation happening in the month of Feb and March. We are beginning to see some kind of stabilization happening. And provided the coronavirus situation can be brought under control, let's say by the month of September, we believe that gradually, economy will start getting healed. Of course, there is a risk in the sense that what are the big risks to the markets if there is a second wave of infection, or we see large dislocation in the Indian economy, let's say in the financial system. There could be a risk that this crisis could be prolonged. But at this point of time, we believe both government and RBI are being proactive. We have seen a very, very major stimulus coming from RBI. They have done 75 basis points of rate cut. They have provided a moratorium which is in place from 1st of March till 31st of May. And we believe very soon, either an extension of the moratorium or a one-time restructuring will happen, which will give some space to the banking and financial services companies to contain the risk which was emerging from this fallout. So we believe this is a great year to gradually build a equity market portfolio. Let's say between now and December, we believe that if we were to spread out the investments, rather than putting everything in one shot, we believe it will be a good idea, to build a portfolio. Let's say invest 30% now, 30% let's say around September, October, and then finally another 30% by the month of December. that portfolio, in our view, should do very well in the next 3 to 5 years, considering that the entry level valuation is extremely attractive. What I will now do is invite my colleague Animesh, who will also share his thoughts on our strategies.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Varun, and good evening to everyone. I'm talking about high conviction equity portfolio and an Indian corporate leaders fund. So it's important to understand who are India's corporate leaders. So basically, companies that are dominant in domestic market and are typically in top 5 domestically and top 10 in their areas of operational internationally. And another interesting aspect is that companies should have should aspire to become global leaders in their product or segments. So that is on part, and companies should also consistently deliver superior performance in terms of both revenue, profitability, and capital efficiency vis-a-vis their competition. And this should ideally translate into a high return on capital employed and high ROEs for the company. And companies should also have established leadership in the Indian market and should have that hunger and should be nimble so that they can be globally competitive. And they also go on to become a significant players in the international arena. And such companies typically generate free cash flow consistently over longer period of time. So those are the characteristics of India's corporate leaders. So now moving on to returns as of April 30th, 2020. If you look at 1 year performance, our portfolio was down -2% compared to Nifty 500 of -17%, translating into a alpha of around 15.4%. And if you go slightly back in time on a 5-year period, portfolio has given a return of 8% compared to 3.5% for the Nifty 500. And since inception, portfolio is up 14% compared to 7.9% for Nifty, translating into an alpha of 6.5%. So that was on the return part. Over to you, Varun.
Yeah, so as we can see across various strategies on Nippon India alternate asset platform, we have seen very strong performance, and that is largely as you can see from our very clear stock picking approach of must 5 framework of investments, where we have looked at companies consistently with low debt. We have looked at companies with high return on equity. So most of our companies, if you see, have ROEs of more than 15%. And we believe that this is a very essential attribute in companies, which we believe can do well from a 3 to 5 year perspective. So across different strategies, there is a very clear unifying trend of investing in companies with good clean balance sheets, high ROEs, good corporate governance. I'm very happy to share that in the last 3 years, despite so many accidents that we have had, we have not had a single stock, which had a problem of share pledge or corporate governance or anything like that. And I think our must 5 framework has really helped us avoid some of those pitfalls. So that's all that I had to share. Sankalp, if you want to open the floor for questions, maybe we
will take questions now. So we have a few questions already from our clients. So the first question that we take is on the banking sector, because somewhere your portfolios, even the new portfolio and the high conviction portfolio, have around 30-35% in BFSI. So outlook on BFSI, what happens as the gradual opening up happens and firms realize that business is hit? So what do you think will be the impact there in BFSI?
Yeah, see, BFSI is one sector that we believe is most impacted because of this current crisis. The reason being, as I said, a lot of small businesses, be it the SMEs, MSMEs, be it farmers, there is a lot of growth that we saw in the last 3 years as far as personal loans are concerned, whether it's credit card loans, unsecured lending. So here what will happen is, if there are no incomes, let's say for a period of 2 to 3 months, if a lot of people lose job or have, let's say, salary cuts, there is definitely going to be pressure on repayment. So banks will see 3 problems in our view. One, they are going to keep surplus liquidity. Since liquidity is tight, So we are going to see a pressure on margins. Second, we are going to see large delinquencies. So they will have to provide more. So there will be pressure on profits. And third, in this environment, nobody wants to grow. So growth will go for a toss. So across all the three reasons, we believe that there will be pressure. So in our view, it is very, very important to stick to extremely high quality private sector banking names, large cap private sector banking names, where there has been a decently good underwriting capability. Also, our view is that it is essential to avoid those banking and financial services names where there is no hard collateral. So I think microfinance could be one of the worst hit sectors. Unsecured retail lending institutions will also be badly impacted. Also, I think some institutions which will do well even in this time, let's say gold finance companies. As you know, rural India has around $300 billion worth of gold. And what do people in rural India do? The first sign of financial stress, they take their family jewels and they take it to a neighborhood gold finance companies and take some money for 3 months and 6 months, which provides some liquidity. So, and of course, gold prices have done very well. So financial services, we believe there are three pockets which will continue to be okay. One is the large cap tier 1 private sector banking names. Second is the gold finance companies. And third, the insurance companies. I think the trend to take health insurance will increase, and especially people will also look at increasing their coverage of health insurance, considering that the times are tough. So we will see insurance, both general and life insurance companies do well. Asset management companies, while they have taken a hit in the short term, but we believe that they are also significantly better placed as some of these lending institutions, because there is no short-term liability, that they really have to provide for. So these are the three sectors within the banking financial service space. The tier 1 private sector banks, gold finance companies, and insurance companies should do well even in this environment.
Okay, thank you, Varun. So the next question is again something to do with sectoral balances. So view quickly on autos, and the other follow-up question, because you spoke about insurance a bit, is how do you go about looking at an insurance business typically? Because I think insurance have the least history of being listed in the country. So how do you do that? And also considering that the mother of all insurers, LIC, was put up for listing. So how do those things play? And quickly a short view on auto sector as well.
Yeah, so let's start with auto. I think auto, as we have seen almost a 2.5 year downtrend playing out auto. So I think if you want to, in our view, if you want to have a handle of the strength of the economy, auto is the most important sector. In every, in last 20 years of equity markets, be it 2001 crisis, be it 2008 crisis, and now 2019-20 crisis, auto sector starts underperforming or falling. You would see at least 1.5 to 2 years before the actual crisis, because it is a leading indicator of the slowdown in the economy. Every time we have seen that when the customers start holding on to auto purchase, it is a sign that there is some kind of distress in terms of incomes and salaries. And this time again, if you see from 2018 onwards, both the two-wheeler and the four-wheeler space has gone through a slowdown. And we have seen very, very big corrections in the auto space. Our sense is it might take another 6 to 9 months before the auto space starts to pick up. I think in the initial phase, we will see the tractor space doing well, because the rural part of the economy is still doing better. The coronavirus is largely an urban problem. We are seeing tractor sales beginning to pick up. Also, the two-wheeler space, we believe, should pick up. The most vulnerable sector in our view will be the four-wheeler space, because of incomes come down. Then we believe the four-wheeler segment should see some more time. But auto, I think in the next 6 to 9 months, we should start seeing recovery, and we should wait out some more time, for that sector before we go all in terms of investment. As far as insurance is concerned, our view is that this is still a largely under-penetrated sector in India. There is a very wide opportunity both in life insurance and in health insurance. Less than 2% people in India have a health insurance. And I think there is a very large trend which is playing out now is that, if you look at healthcare, healthcare has become very expensive. I was just reading some numbers. If you are infected with, let's say, COVID-19 and you are put on ventilator, the average expense in a private hospital is 1 lakh rupees per day, right? So it is almost impossible for almost 99% of India's population to pay for this expense on their own. So unless they have a health insurance, it is very difficult to pay for healthcare expenses. And in fact, healthcare expenses have been a big reason why a lot of people have been pushed down into poverty. And therefore, we believe the penetration of health insurance will increase. Life insurance has become much more important to ensure financial stability of families. And I think we have just scraped the surface as of now. In terms of penetration, we have a very large opportunity, although the valuations have been a little expensive, but we believe these companies should continue to do well from a 3 to 5 year perspective.
Sure. So the next question, I think you and Shehzad sir both can probably answer. So a lot of AMCs have, a way of advising a particular philosophy or a strategy. What is that USP which Nippon has as a common thread through all of its portfolios, and what is it that philosophy, that keeps Nippon doing what it is doing?
Varun, you want to answer that?
Sir, do you want to take this? Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll add to whatever you say.
Okay, so as we were sharing, that we have a unique must-5 framework of investments. If we can just put, that one of the fact sheets back on screen, I can just quickly take you through that. So across all our, products, on all the alternate side, yes. So this is what we call the unique must-5 framework of investments. Here, as you can see, we are looking at these 5 attributes in every company. One is the business potential. We are obviously looking to invest from a long term. We typically don't like to buy and sell in short periods of time. Any investment that we do is from a 3 to 5 year point of view. So we are looking at companies which can grow at 15 to 20% for the next 3 to 5 years, both on top line and bottom line. Second, corporate governance becomes extremely important. We are looking at companies with good, clean balance sheets. We are looking at companies which treat the minority shareholders with respect. Therefore, we are continuously looking at companies which are regular dividend paying. Then we also want them to have good earnings track record. What is their sales track record of last 5 years? What is their profit track record of last 5 years? And that becomes extremely important. Then promoters' credentials. As you know, we have seen a lot of accidents, in the last few years about about promoter pledge. So we do not like companies which have any pledges. We do not like companies which are too diversified, maybe 2 or 3 business streams. And then the management is focused on that. And finally, capital allocation also becomes extremely important in the sense that ROCs, ROEs should have been more than 15%. So typically all our portfolios have ROEs, aggregate ROEs at the portfolio level between 15 to 20%. And that is something that we believe is extremely essential if we expect companies to do well in the next 3 to 5 years.
That's sir?
I'll just add very briefly, Varun covered everything, is that we're very focused on delivering on this consistently. I think to us, that is the important thing. It's that when you look at all our portfolios, right? So you look at our PMS, you look at our AIF, you look at across everything, across time and across strategies. We have been very consistent, and our primary focus is more consistent delivery and generally with a lower risk. We've got so that's very, very important. You see, we are not looking at, we've showed you all our portfolios. All our portfolios are available, all of them very consistent. And I repeat, across time, across strategies. And that's very, very important, right? Because when an investor comes in, he needs to get a fairly stable experience. We are not promising you most rocket returns. That's not our focus. We're promising you superior, consistent returns. That's what, when I say want promising you, we endeavor for superior, consistent returns. What we can say with a great degree of pride is that we have done that, and we've done it in a fairly de-risked manner. And where does the de-risking come in? I know de-risking is a more fashionable term over the last some time, but even jab ghor teji thi some time back, we've continued to focus on that. So we've always had companies with a very low debt equity, because like if you don't have debt, you can't go bankrupt. If you can't go bankrupt, well, you may grow slow, you may derate, but it's unlikely you will implode, right? So that's something which we've very, very much focused on, and it's been consistently there. And it's been consistently there also in terms of, maybe we did something right, maybe God was kind, but we've not had any mishap. And you've seen a lot of PMSs and a lot of AIFs where there have been mishaps, especially in the mid-tier, smaller stocks. So we've done fairly well. So what we always endeavor for is a consistent approach towards that with a low risk framework. And we believe that over a period of time, our strategy will deliver as it has over the last few years.
Sure.
Will
Thank you.
deliver as we have over the
So, I'll just take the next question, which is a very interesting question. So, Shahzad sir, you began with a very pride Japanese heritage and a parentage of, Nippon. But as we know, Nippon was erstwhile Reliance Asset Management. So, any thought on what has changed over the Japanese coming in, and essentially what is the new outlook all about at Nippon? Thank
Sure.
you.
So that's a very nice question. Very nice question. I'm happy someone asked that. So number one, just to explain that, it was firstly, of course, Reliance Capital Asset Management, Reliance Nippon Life Asset Management Company, and now Nippon Life Asset Management Company. So there have been different, so to speak, shareholding has changed over a period of time. But the most important thing to you investors is that the team has been consistent. And in an asset management company, what do you need? You need a great team, because ultimately what they are managing is your money. You don't have a factory. You don't require huge amounts of capital, but you require a team to be stable. So you look all across the organization. The team has been extremely stable. Senior people at all levels, and I would say middle level, all very, very stable and actually growing. We continue to attract very, very good talent. So that's something which is very important. And I think I would always lay hard. You should always focus on that part as to who your team is, who's managing it, and so on and so forth. So that's point number one. Point number two is that with whatever shareholding pattern there was, this company has always been a world-class company. We were the largest asset manager over the last few years, and you don't get there we have very, very, I have a very, very high respect for all our competitors as an asset management company. When I include that, I'm saying from a mutual fund perspective, for a PMS perspective, AIF perspective, there are a lot of formidable competitors. To be number one or to be very large in that space, we were at that one point in time. That obviously means that you were very good. We continue to be among the top few players in that space, despite whatever has happened in the past. And now to come to, on your thing on what's happened from a Japanese with a new ownership perspective, just to explain, it's actually not new. Nippon Life Japan has had a stake in this company since 2012. The stake was lower, and today it's a majority stake. So it obviously means they've seen this company, they've been on the board of this company, they've been involved with this company for the last very many years. So this is not something like new ownership. Ab kya hoga? Kuch nahi hoga. It's the same owner. You had one party taking more share. In fact, what is very important is when you see when there was this change in ownership, the president of Nippon Life Japan said, we see our Indian employees as our partners in India, right? So that's the way it is. So nothing has changed from that perspective. What has changed for the positive is even more systems, more process, more controls. It's not as if we didn't have that there. Our entire industry is wonderfully regulated by SEBI, who is the most wonderful and most proactive regulator. So they've got best in class, I would say, systems, processes there, which avoids any mishap across any of the products or offerings which SEBI governs. So there was never an issue there. We've only further strengthened it. We've also strengthened what you would see. We've got further commitment from Nippon Life. We've also got a fair amount of money from Nippon Life coming in across all our strategies, across different asset classes, and you'll only see that increase. So net, it's positive. Like our masthead says, it's Japanese perfection meets Indian passion. So with that, you can only have a very, very potent and a very, very positive combination for our investors. And I'm sure that they will gain significantly from that.
Sure. And I hope the returns will follow
the returns are already there. and so while I must add on a serious note, there is no assurance whatsoever of returns. There is no guarantee. We assure you is that we continue to endeavor to try our very best to deliver consistent above average returns to our investors in a low risk with a low risk model.
Sure, sir. So now we will come back to economics and market again. So this is again a very interesting question. I think Varun, you will be happy to take this. The question is, what will companies be more challenged with? Demand side slacks or supply side issues? When I mean supply side issues, I would also want you to touch upon the labor issue that is going on, with factories seeing very low, utilizations or very low, workers coming in. So what do you think will be a major problem or a bigger problem going ahead?
I think this is going to be dependent on, there is no one size fits all kind of an answer. In different sectors, different companies, we will see different outlooks. So I'm very happy to share that in some sectors, even during the lockdown, for instance, let's say FMCG, let's say pharma, even specialty chemicals, because a lot of specialty chemicals go into pharma and FMCG, a very large number of plants were always operational. In fact, closed for a short period and then they were opened. So we are already seeing 56, 70% utilization levels in some of these sectors. And now that utilization levels are going up, gradually plants are being opened up. We believe that some of these things should become fairly normalized pretty soon. However, there are sectors where there is a lot of migrant labor which is used. So, for instance, sectors like construction, right? So, a lot of sectors, let's say real estate, infrastructure projects and construction, where there is a lot of migrant labor which is deployed. And if the migrant labor is going back to their hometowns now, and a lot of movement is being seen, we believe some of these sectors can struggle. And I think once labor goes home now, it is unlikely they will come back before Diwali. So for the next few months, what could happen is some of these labor intensive sectors, either the rate of labor will go up or there will be a shortfall. So there could be some supply side concerns on these sectors. On the other side, if you see the agriculture sector or the tier 2, tier 3 areas, now that this migrant labor has returned home or is returning home, we believe that the agri labor cost will stay very low. And to that extent, it is actually disinflationary, for the agricultural space. So some necessity sectors, pharma, FMCG, telecom, agriculture, we think we are largely okay. On some of the other sectors, there could be some supply issues. As far as demand is concerned, there are sectors, let's say like multiplexes. There are sectors like hotels where people will see demand come back the last, because everyone will be scared to go out to a picture hall to watch a movie. And then if you have to sit and if to leave one seat vacant in between, what's the point of going out for a movie with your family, right? So, concerns like that will make this sector the last to recover. Similarly, a lot of companies are going to cut down on discretionary spends on travel, tourism. So some of these sectors should see very large demand destruction. And I know we would be cautious on these sectors.
Thank you, Varun. So we'll take the last question. And the question is very interesting, actually. So Reliance, erstwhile Reliance has been known for spotting trends. So you guys were one of the first to spot the pharma generics bull run in India. So when Reliance talks about trends, or now Nippon talks about trends, I take them very seriously. So now you're talking about specialty chemicals. So towards the end, I would like you to take 5-10 minutes. You've got time, and explain what is it that you feel is special about the business, and what kind of companies do you think will drive India's specialty chemical urge? Over to you.
I think we last 3 years across various products, we have been invested in chemicals in an aggressive manner. And our early conviction in this sector is premised on 3 broad things. One, India already has a existing chemical sector even before this shift from China started, right? So we have a good chemistry skills. We have a very large number of people in India, who qualify for something which is called B Pharma and M Pharma, and which is a qualification which is needed in this space. Second, in early 80s and 90s, Gujarat was the hub of chemicals, and Gujarat High Court came up with environmental norms, way back in 1980s. And ever since then, Indian companies have been trying to adhere to the environmental norms, which have come up in China only in the last 5-10 years. So I think one, India had good chemistry skills. India had good environmental norms. So there was a base industry. And now we are seeing a very big shift happening from across the world for 3 reasons. One, the US-China trade war is making companies have production centers in India. Second, the labor cost in India is now cheaper than labor in China. The electricity cost in India is now cheaper than electricity cost in China. And a lot of European and American companies are worried about intellectual property theft. If you see, there are a lot of accusations of intellectual property theft which have happened in China. So some very large companies in Europe and in US have said that they feel more comfortable doing business with companies in India, than they are as compared to companies in China. So what we have seen in the last 5 years, some very dynamic Indian entrepreneurs have actually scaled up their business while these companies were always around for last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But we have seen them scaling up their operations, setting up, affluent treatment plants. And gradually we have seen that today, I'm very happy to share that by end of 2020, March 2020, India has a $35 billion of revenue coming from the chemical space already. The same number for China is around $200 billion. And various studies show that in the next 6 to 7 years, this can triple. This can be a $100 billion industry, as compared to what it is today. Just to put some numbers in perspective, if you see IT, if you see last 30 years, what is the big sector that India has created, which is information technology, which is a $110 million industry. What it means is that despite 30 years, despite all the glamour, IT, while it has done very well, it is a $110 billion industry in India. So we believe the next big driver of India's export growth, could be chemicals and specialty chemicals in particular. As I said, this could be a $100 billion industry in the next decade. We are seeing a lot of companies. So we have, companies, let's say a company which has been among the top 5 companies in the dyes and pigment space. This is a debt-free company, companies which have good corporate governance that we believe can really scale up fast. We have a dominant company in India, which is the leader in benzene chemistry. This is again a company that is able to make a lot of derivatives. Let's also keep in mind that this requirement for your sanitizers, requirement for various industrial cleaners will be in place for next several years. So that is a big opportunity. Then if you see pharma, if you see FMCG, every cosmetic requires a specialty chemical. Every skin ointment requires a specialty chemical. Right. So this is a very, very large opportunity. And we believe this business can be done in a capital efficient manner. This business can be done in a way which is very, very scalable. We are already seeing companies in US and in Europe actually giving money to the companies in India to set up plants, which means that this business can be done in a capital efficient manner also. So, like I said earlier, India has missed a lot of buses. We have given away the whole textile business to Vietnam and Bangladesh. We have given or we have actually vacated the whole semiconductor electric vehicle space to China, Taiwan, Korea. If there is one sector, where India has a head start and where we can really do well, it is specialty chemicals. And we will see a lot of winners emerge in this space in the next 5 to 10 years.
Sure. Thank you. So thank you so much, the Nippon Asset Management team, for being with us today. Thank you, audience, for being with us. You can know more about the Nippon portfolios at pmscaifworld.com, or you can give us a shout and we will be happy to take any queries about the Nippon portfolio. Thank you, sirs. Thank you so much for your time today. Look forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having us. And thank you, audience, for being a very lovely and patient audience. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.